Hello and welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Today we have an interesting reaction video because archaeologists have found a pharaoh's second tomb, and this is the
They hit the second tomb.
yeah, yes, exactly. This is
We've
the
had one already, but what about Second Tomb?
this is
About
the second
11Zs.
tomb of King Thutmose II, where archaeologists had previously discovered the very first tomb in 1922. Now, 102 years later, news comes out that they believe they found the second tomb, which is interesting. And you might ask yourself, why would a person have two tombs? Well, because two is better than one, obviously. When in reality, the story goes that the first one may have been flooded, and that's what led them to build a secondary one.
Yeah. Now, what's fun about it is the first tomb was built and Thutmose II was placed in it. Then 6 years later, it flooded and they moved him, which shows a bit of an interesting level of dedication here for the Egyptian pharaohs, where they didn't just put him in there and then hush everyone up and forget about it. They monitored the site
Yeah.
to the point where they were willing to respond to an ecological disaster and relocate him.
So the tomb was still being revered, at least,
Yeah.
I mean,
when it flooded.
it wasn't
yeah.
that long after his death. 6 years isn't that long in the grand scheme of things. And the interesting thing that I find is the first tomb was located behind a waterfall. And, that just makes me think, I wonder why it may have flooded.
Yeah.
Yeah, somebody got a little too ambitious.
Yeah. But also, like, with the waterfall, that's why a lot of these tombs, you know, they're meant to be secret. These rock cut valley tombs, people aren't supposed to know about, which is why it's significant that people were bothering to keep track of this tomb being here, because usually the pharaohs want everyone hushed.
And they believe that this second tomb is buried underneath a 75-foot man-made pile of limestone, ash, rubble, and mud plaster, and that they specifically designed it to look like a part of the mountain, which is honestly fascinating to me because that level of camouflage for a burial is fascinating. Obviously, they didn't want people to know because even back in this era, in this age, looting of these tombs was exceptionally common, especially for the lower class peasants and commoners that may not have had access to that level of material wealth.
Yeah. Yeah. Pharaonic tombs are very ostentatious in this time, even though we are a millennia past the pyramid builders. When Thutmose is buried, Thutmose ruled in the early 15th century BC. So this is 3,400 3,500 years ago is when he is in charge. And they desperately wanted their tombs to be left undisturbed, which meant hiding them from everyone.
Which is why being an archaeologist is so much fun, because it's like playing a treasure map. It's trying to find the secret treasure buried in this valley, hidden behind these stones that are disguised. And the team of archaeologists, led by Mr. Litherland, have basically decided to tunnel into this rock mound to try and uncover this secondary tomb, which they believe is present down there. But they originally stopped their first attempted tunnel because it was way too dangerous.
Yep.
I didn't realize that.
So it's very interesting because when they found the first tomb in the area that was associated with the resting places of royal women, but they found an entire burial that was decorated, which is a usual telltale sign of a pharaoh. And the cool thing in my mind that I really like to see is that the ceiling was still intact. It still had the blue paint and yellow stars there, and these are something that's only found in king's tombs, in the pharaoh's tombs.
Yep. And Thutmose here, he's something of an interesting pharaoh to begin with, because his claim to fame isn't anything in his own right. His claim to fame is the fact that he is pharaoh because he married the existing pharaoh, Hatshepsut, who
Yep,
was
that's right.
one of who is one of the great female pharaohs of Egypt. Egypt had very few women of power, and Hatshepsut is one of them, and she's kind of one of the more prosperous. The most famous is, of course, Cleopatra the Seventh, who slept with Julius Caesar and Mark Antony and literally everyone else.
Supposedly.
Hey, you can't hate on her for
She
liking
was
powerful men.
she had massive levels of charisma and intelligence to back it up. The woman spoke 7 languages.
I mean, that's hot.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah.
Small correction. The original tomb wasn't discovered in 1922. The team had found the original tomb, and the original tomb had an inscription on it that talked about the remains and contents could have been moved to a second location, which was nearby his wife, Hatshepsut.
Yep.
Hatshepsut. Oh. Some of these Egyptian names are kind of difficult, but this is very interesting.
Hatshepsut.
And one of the things that is also very interesting is the possibility that the remains of Thutmose is potentially wrong. That they might have the wrong mummy on display at the Egyptian Museum, at the National Museum of Egyptian Civilization. So
Wouldn't that be a plot twist?
this has the potential, and obviously this is very early on for an article to get released. We often talk about the delay and the lag in research versus publication. This seems like it was something that they have a pretty good idea. I mean, when you come to actually publish something like this, you have to have a pretty reasonable assumption that there's going to be something there. And the idea that now they're publishing it leads you to think that they might be onto something. This has potential to be one of the greatest Egyptology finds of the 21st century.
Yeah. Yeah, this is pretty big. This is, it's a secondary tomb for a pharaoh. It's a second tomb, which really doesn't happen because the tombs are kept hidden. Their location gets lost fairly quickly. That's usually an intentional thing. And, most tombs don't suffer ecological disaster during that brief window when people are still monitoring them to make sure that everything got set up right.
It's just a very interesting concept, and it leads the mind to wonder a little bit. One, was someone else's remains potentially stashed in the first tomb? Is that why we have the misidentified mummy? Two, what could we potentially find in the secondary tomb? Like, what could potentially be present there? And that leads me to just think about some of the cool grave goods that may have been unlooted because of the moving of the second tomb.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of potentials here, and this is a very interesting cutting-edge story, and I'm very curious to see what's going to end up happening out of this. So as soon as an update does get published, we'll definitely talk about it here. But I think that's probably a great point for us to wrap up. You guys have any last final thoughts you'd like to add?
That's a good place to end it, I think. But
Yeah, I think so too.
Awesome. Thank you guys for watching. Let us know your thoughts down below, and we'll see you in the next video.